Hey everybody, there we are. Look at that. you're triggering the epileptics in the audience, Corey, with the
Oh
fast
man.
cutting. Hey everybody, welcome to Random Assignment. I'm Bob Bowden with Corey DeAngelis as always, and that's us. If you're watching or if you're listening, welcome to the iTunes /Stitcher /podcast version of Random Assignment. And Corey, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Loving the image. Bipartisan support.
What do you think? Yeah, it
If you
looks
can
like.
get one person from that's a Democratic representative, you can call the bill bipartisan, right? So this is pretty cool.
You sure can. And we'll talk about that in a second. I wanted to first just tell you I'm slightly traumatized, Corey. I had a contractor at my house, and I told him, like, everything I could say. Don't make this mistake. Don't make that mistake. I'm not going to be there watching you, but make sure and don't do this. Make sure to do that. And there's like walking away. So, there's one thing I didn't tell him. And that's the thing he did, of course. I'm sure knew, like he was putting up the wooden wainscot. It's called, like the bottom half of the wall, like has these kind of lines in them. These wooden, you can see my hand now. These vertical lines, but you like buy them at like Home Depot in sections, and they tongue and groove in to make the wall. And they have a different design on the front and the back. And he put some of them in with the design one way, and some of them in with the design the other way. So I am mildly traumatized. I'm like, I guess I'm not going to rip it all out. I guess I'll just leave it. There's like several times where he switched, sometimes using the A side, other times using the B side. So I know America was desperately waiting for that update from me, but that was my.
Dang, it's horrible.
Yes.
You're not going to be able to go back home after this.
First world problem, I guess. I can tell it to Somalian refugees about my wainscoting reversal issue. Anyway, yes. Okay, so what's going on? What's going on in the world of education, Corey?
Well, before we get to the bipartisan support of the House version of the School Choice Now Act, we should get to some of the things that were discussed in the Republican National Convention, the second night of the Republican National Convention. Last night, there was a lot of support for school choice. It kept coming up. It did come up the first night too, right? I don't remember who.
Little bit.
Said it, but last night it was all on fire. We had, I want to say, 4 people at least that I tweeted about mentioned school choice, and I think there were 2 others that, like Eric Trump, for example, said something about it really quickly, and I didn't really tweet about it because it wasn't much, but at least 6 people that I can come up the top of my head mentioned school choice. And here's a clip from
Actually, let me just interrupt 1 second before you play the clip. In my opinion, and you may disagree, when some of the Trump family is up there, I kind of roll my eyes. Like I don't really want to. If you're an unelected person who's related to Trump, I'm like, it's the same. I have the same reaction. Michelle Obama talking at conventions. You've never been elected to anything. Why are you talking to me right now? I really don't care. But when you get a rock star talking about our issue,
Boom.
And I would call Tim Scott such a man, that changes everything.
Yep, and here's his money quotes on education and in particular school choice.
I realized a quality education is the closest thing to magic in America. That's why I fight to this day for school choice, to make sure every child in every neighborhood has a quality education. I don't care if it's a public, private, charter, virtual, or a homeschool. When a parent has a choice, their kid has a better chance. And the president has fought alongside me on that.
I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think that's a future president. We'll see. But I've said it before privately. I don't think I've ever said that publicly before. I think that Senator Scott has a big future. But anyway, go ahead.
Yes, when I tweeted this last night, or was it 2 nights ago? I can't remember. But yeah, a lot of people were responding to my tweet, Scott 2024. So a lot of people have a lot of faith in Tim Scott, and he's a big school choice proponent. I liked his quote, when a family has a choice, their children have a better chance.
Closest thing to magic in America is a good education, he says. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I didn't want to rain on your Trump family quote parade. You want to show some of those tweets?
Yeah, let's hit some of those. But I also want to point out that for the listeners, Tim Scott is one of the legislators who put out the initial version of the School Choice Now Act in the Senate. So That's Tim Scott. But here's also Melania Trump ended the night last night with a quote on school choice. She said, "This president also continues to fight for school choice, giving parents more options to help their children flourish." So that was super late last night. Must have been like 10:45 Eastern when that came on. She was the final speaker of the night. But also Tiffany Trump, Trump's daughter, said, "We believe in school choice because a child's zip code in America should not determine their future." And I don't have the screenshot of Donald Trump Jr., but he said something similar. I have it right in front of me. He said, "A great education cannot be the exclusive right of the rich and powerful. It must be accessible to all. And that's why my dad is pro school choice." So I like how he's bringing up the equity argument too for school choice, that he's like, hey, look, I got to go to a nice private school, and a lot of more advantaged families can afford private schools, but school choice is really an equalizer, and that allows less advantaged families to do so as well. So I'm glad he pointed that out. But yeah,
but we have all of those people at the convention praising school choice, but somebody wasn't happy that all of these people at the RNC. I mean, I don't even know if I don't really would even call this a convention. Just like last week, I didn't think the Democrats had a convention. Is it a convention? It's more of like
they're speaking to an empty room.
Yeah, it's a string of pre-recorded videos, I think. But anyway,
yep.
For whatever.
Yeah,
all right, so I'll call it a convention.
Didn't like these.
Somebody wasn't happy. Somebody wasn't happy. Look at that. Randy Weingarten wasn't happy.
Boom. Here's Randy Weingarten. We heard over and over about quote unquote school choice. This is their way of pushing to defund public education, which Bob, you hit her on this, and a lot of Lindsey Burke from Heritage hit her on this. Yeah. I hit her on this. This is what you said, Bob. What a tell. To use school choice equals quote unquote defunding public ed. In a clearer way than perhaps ever before, you've confirmed for all of us your belief that a significant number of families want out of traditional public schools. Should we just call it a hashtag jailbreak? Yeah, so Lindsay said something similar. I mean, yeah, it's an admission that when you give people the choice to leave, that they're going to leave, because otherwise there would be no defunding going on with public schools. And then she likes to throw in always that, 90% of kids today attend public schools, which is not true.
Correction. Your favorite
correction.
Yeah,
it's not even true. Yeah. Only 82% of children attend district-run public schools.
She's throwing in public charter schools into that number, which are mostly not unionized. And she plays with the numbers to whatever way suits her.
She classifies charter schools as private. So when she's saying public schools, yes. She's not counting the charters. But look, this isn't even a good argument anyway. Even if it were true that 90% of kids were in public schools, would that many children choose public schools when given the option to leave? Obviously not. I mean, we've seen.
According to her, they wouldn't. According to her, it would defund public ed if you give them a choice to leave.
She admits it in the same tweet. She admits it in the same tweet. And I mean, American Federation for Children and others have done tons of polling on this. And they've asked, if money weren't an option or if you had school choice, where would you choose to send your children? And only about, 40% said that they would 30 to 40% said they'd send their children to district-run public schools, which is much less than 90%. So
and she knows someone answered Randy Weingarten right below there. One Corey DeAngelis had an answer.
Why would giving families an exit option defund public schools? I like to hit them with that all the time. Yeah. They never have an answer. But yeah, it's an admission that they know that when given the option to leave their residentially assigned monopoly schools, that they will flock in large numbers to other options. And we have some evidence of that we'll share in a little bit.
So that's the big picture school choice issue. And it's being talked about more than in my 10 years in this space, probably ever in history, because you have a president who's talking about school choice, at least, especially during the last month or so, 6 weeks, I don't know how long. It's been much more in the national consciousness than ever before. But that's the general big picture issue of school choice.
I want to point out real quick that I forgot to mention, it's also in Trump's second term agenda, which was just released a couple of days ago. He only has 2 points on education, and one of the points is about school choice for every American child. So you can check that out. at the Trump campaign website. But yeah, only 2 bullets on education, and the first one is about school choice for every American child, which is pretty cool to see in his official agenda.
It is. So that's kind of the big picture. But then there is, if we get a little more specific, we have something called an actual bill that's in Congress. Look at this. Breaking. We need the breaking news sound effect here to play. But Senator Tim Scott announced with his own tweet, you can read there, that there is now bipartisan support for the School Choice Now Act. And interesting, I kind of was before thinking it would be hashtag School Choice Now, but now I guess they're using hashtag School Choice Now Act, the forward version of the hashtag. At any rate, yes, it's this Representative Lipinski, Daniel Lipinski, a congressman from Illinois, who has joined on to the support of this. Look at that. He says champion of the middle class, even in his Twitter profile there. Also, he's a former engineer.
Maybe I should follow him. Boom. There we go.
Good idea. And so, what is the School Choice Now Act? If you haven't been following Random Assignment, shame on you. But anyway, it's a bill that creates a one-time emergency infusion of capital for scholarship granting organizations for this COVID-19 era. But it also creates a permanent federal tax credit for donations to nonprofit scholarship granting organizations. So it is both a 1-year provision or part of it, and then it has a permanent federal tax credit part of it, which, we've talked about this before. I don't need to go too deeply again, but, some of our friends are worried about federal involvement at all in the world of education. Education is not in the Constitution. 10th Amendment ought to sort of keep the federal government out of it. But this particular federal tax credit could spur lots of states to begin to have scholarship granting groups that then individuals could get federal tax credits if they made those contributions. So,
yeah, and I think it's a maximum of $5 billion per year for this federal tax credit scholarship. And I want to just add, Bob, that I was one of the more skeptical people in the school choice debate about this federal school choice program, but I've kind of moved towards a neutral position on this officially, and I think there's a lot of benefits to it that could outweigh the costs.
Is that all you are, neutral?
I think I'm pretty neutral, but if I had to call it one way or another, I think it's more benefits than costs. And I think some of the main points on that is that, look, each individual state can voluntarily select to participate in the program or not. Individual schools can make that same participation decision, and individual families can make the same participation decision. And since it's privately funded through tax credit scholarship donations, it's less likely to be regulated. And hey, look, if the federal government wants to regulate private schools, they could do so in another way in the future as well. So I don't think this is as much of a risk as I thought it was when I first heard about the School Choice Now Act.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about some local school district exodus updates. Now, this is not the book of the Bible Exodus, right? This is updates on something else. What exodus? What does this mean, Corey?
Hey, I just want to tell you, I've been calling this for the past couple of months, that the theory that I had was that the reason government school monopolists were freaking out so much about people switching to homeschooling is because they were realizing a few months ago that they're going to lose a lot of students permanently. And we're seeing, at least in the short run for this particular school year, evidence of that. And here's some more from Broward County, Florida. Public school enrollment is down 7,600 students from last year, they reported. And that's about a 3.5% drop in enrollment from last year. And it's even higher if you look at the lower grades. And I want to.
Wow, it must be a big district if 3% is 7,600.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest school districts in the United States. I think it's one of the top 10 or top 20 at least school districts in the United States. Right. And they also reported in this Sun Sentinel piece that, on the other hand, charter school enrollment is up. So it's not just that people are only switching to homeschooling; they're also switching to different types of schools. And I think it's because, Broward County Public Schools made the decision to go remote only, online only. And families are saying, well, that's not going to work for me this year. And charter schools, at least what I've seen in the DC area, are more likely to reopen with some type of in-person experience, maybe a hybrid type of experience. And they're announcing that they're more likely to, reopen at earlier dates in the DC area. I've actually gotten something in the mail from a charter school advertising their hybrid options available to families, whereas the DC public schools aren't doing the same thing. And so I have a feeling that that's happening in Florida as well. And that's why we're seeing upticks in enrollment for charter schools in Florida, but decreases by 3.5% in Broward County, Florida. So that's not all. Jason Bedrick just tweeted out that we're seeing similar trends in the largest school district in Arizona. Mesa Public Schools is reporting a 10% enrollment drop for elementary school students from last year. In particular, a 17% enrollment drop for kindergarten students. So as the students are younger, the enrollment drop seems to be even more substantial. And just looking at the overall enrollment trends, and this is information coming straight from the district, as reported by Lily Alta, who is a reporter at the Arizona Republic. And the overall enrollment decrease seems to be around 5.6% from last year.
Before you go off that, I was a little confused by that. Maybe you can explain it, or maybe you're confused too. But that graphic you just pulled up a second ago says, the first bullet point says enrollment patterns at the beginning of the school year are consistent with prior years. Then it gives a second bullet point that says day 11 comparison. Is this supposed to mean that on day one, the normal amount of kids showed up, and merely 10 days later, you basically, after 2 weeks, all these parents are like, you know what, forget it. Is that what that means?
Consistent with prior years. I mean, that just, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. That doesn't seem very consistent to me. In the second bullet, they say that in previous years, we've seen increases, whereas we're seeing decreases this year. For example,
I thought that what they were saying is the day 11 is the drop happened from day 1 to day 11, but maybe I have that wrong.
I mean, that's the only way that I could really square this, that maybe they're saying, at day 1 or even maybe in July or something, it was the same enrollment, but the parents are unenrolling at the very beginning of the school year for some reason. Okay. And maybe it's because maybe it's because families were staying enrolled.
I get it. They were enrolled officially, paperwork-wise enrolled, but then they didn't show up. I got it.
That, or maybe families were still enrolled officially, and then they said, oh, well, it looks like they're serious. They're not going to do in-person instruction. I'm pulling them out now. I'm jumping ship. I'm doing the homeschool thing. And to go along with this real quick with enrollment trends, I just want to report all of the data that I've seen so far in this. So Maricopa County homeschooling filings in Arizona are up 229% from the same time last year. In Vermont, up 75%. Wisconsin, up 128%. Loudoun County, Virginia, up 129%. 21% increase from the same time last year in Nebraska. And that's pretty much it. But every number that we're getting on this is huge. Oh, and then we also reported last week, the largest school district in Utah is up 175%. So we're seeing an exodus, and I guess I mean
the homeschool numbers are up, is what you're saying.
These are the homeschool filing numbers from the same time last year.
Right.
And I just want to say, we'll bring it up in a second again, but the Gallup poll that just came out is also suggesting homeschooling is doubling this year from last year, from about 5% to 10% of the school age population.
So one other thing we noticed, imagine for a second that you or gentle listener out there, wherever you're hearing my voice, you are running a school district somewhere, and you're seeing this. You're seeing some parents say, I'm afraid of the virus. I don't care what happens. I'm not sending my kid. You're seeing other parents say, I desperately need, my kid needs an in-person experience. How dare you deny it to me? And then you see maybe some people in between who are deciding there's a cynical way to do this, think of this, and a kind of more wholesome way to think of it. The cynical way is like, oh, you want the enrollment because you want to keep the money that the kids, generate when they show up. Or you can just say, I want to serve the public as best I can. But what we're seeing is some districts and states, in fact, do some unusual things to try to reassure parents as much as possible that everything's going to be great. So we found this clip from Rhode Island, for example, where the governor is setting up, it's almost like we actually have a hurricane, I think, hitting the Gulf Coast right now in Louisiana, but the governor of Rhode Island is setting up like a hurricane-like task force, like a special group, like an emergency group to deal with COVID school stuff. Like if they hear there's a couple cases in a school, they rush out there, or they find out a certain school isn't distancing properly, or some other school run out of masks or something. They have this emergency team that they're telling parents, we're going to put this hurricane-like team together to deal with this. So we found a clip from Rhode Island to show you that.
I pressed the governor at today's briefing on whether her mind is already made up to allow in-person classes in Rhode Island next month. She acknowledged she's leaning strongly in that direction, but says she wants one more week to decide. More than a month into phase 3 of Rhode Island's reopening plan, coronavirus trends appear to have stabilized.
Relative to a lot of other states, I think we're holding our own.
Rhode Island's positivity rate, the share of all tests coming back positive, has remained below 5% for nearly 3 months. That has the governor increasingly optimistic about sending students back into their classrooms on September 14th.
But I'm going to stick to what we said from the beginning. Operational readiness, testing, contact tracing, data, case prevalence. And Sunday, we're going to see if we check all those boxes, which I think we will based on where we are today.
As part of that effort, today the governor launched a new Education Operations Center supported by the National Guard. It's supposed to provide 24/7 assistance to local school districts on everything from contact tracing to transportation.
This Education Operations Center is going to operate very much like the EOC that we stand up during a hurricane or a blizzard or some other kind of natural disaster.
A 24-hour-a-day education operations center. You picture like they're all lined up there. They're the phones. They're ready to at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like I think they're having to reuse masks in public schools, such and such. Oh, we'll get on that right away. They come down a pole or something, run out of the truck. I don't know, but it's probably sensible. I'm making fun of it a little bit, but it probably is sensible to, have plans in place to try to deal with potential virus showing up or something. But anyway, I don't want to show you that.
Well, Bob, I just want to point out that I think the public school districts are really freaking out right now because they're seeing, like in Arizona, that, oh crap, like we're funded partially based on enrollment, and we aren't seeing the enrollment that we were expecting. We were expecting families just to, really enjoy our remote learning and not seek out other alternatives like homeschooling. So, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how Denver Public Schools issued a statement telling people not to do the pandemic pods because they're going to lose $10,700 a student. We saw Falls Church City Public Schools in Virginia doing the same thing. And now we actually had an email come from a San Diego Unified Public School elementary principal, send it to all of the families who she was thinking were going to switch to homeschooling, and essentially threatened them with calls from CPS or Child Welfare Services. And here's the tweets on it. San Diego Public School principal sent an email threatening investigations from Child Welfare Services if families who wish to homeschool don't send her proof of an accredited homeschool program. So here's the email. I have it up on the screen. It's kind of tough to read. But essentially, she goes through and says, hey, we have this new regulation. You need to send us proof of an accredited homeschool program, which is not even true in California. In California, all you have to do is file a private school affidavit if you want to homeschool your children. You can go to HSLDA to look up information on this, hslda.org. So it's not even true that you have to send any information at all to the local public school district. You certainly don't have to send any information to the public school principal. But essentially, this is a form of kind of bullying parents and saying, it's almost like threatening them, saying that, you don't want child welfare services coming to your house, do you? And it's not even true. And then she ends the email pretty much saying this. Here's the quote. Well, we really do hope that all families give our public schools a chance to show what we can do. And, she cites funding.
Instead of we really hope that all families do what's best for their individual kids.
Oh, no, give us a chance because if you don't, we're going to call CPS maybe.
Yes, exactly. The default is not do what's best for your child. The default is give us a chance, and then maybe it'll be best for your child, maybe not, whatever. But what we really hope is you do the thing that helps us. If that happens to help the kid, oh, that's gravy. That's pretty much the.
I mean,
right?
yeah, it just goes to show you they're going pretty low to try to keep their enrollment numbers up. And look, we've never seen this before, and I think it's because they are afraid. And look, San Diego Unified isn't providing in-person instruction; it's remote only. And these other two districts, Denver Public Schools and Falls Church City, they're also all remote. So they're essentially saying we're not going to reopen our schools, but you shouldn't go anywhere else either because we need to keep our money, and we don't want to lose enrollment numbers. But that's kind of like, Trader Joe's not reopening their stores and saying, oh, you shouldn't go shop at Walmart or Whole Foods. That would be horrible because, we need to continue paying our employees, even though we're not going to open and those other stores are opening. I mean, that's
Corey, do you ever think about who are these people with the jobs of certifying homeschool curriculum? Like, do they show up to the house and like, I got the job, and I'm like, yeah, it looks okay to me. You got a laptop? Okay, I'll sign off on that. Like,
yeah,
really?
I mean,
how rigorous is this?
I don't know. I don't know, but I don't trust the bureaucrats coming into your houses, your homes, and being fair in
I don't
judging.
know if they mean that. Maybe they just mean that there's an online curriculum that they say, oh, we say that's okay. But I don't know. What if it's not online? What if you're using books and textbooks and stuff?
Yeah, and I mean,
how come?
The email wasn't even true, right? You don't have to send that information. You if anything, you have to send a private school affidavit. So you file your homeschool as essentially a private school, and you send it to the California Department of Education. You don't need to send it to the public school district or the public school principal. So that's not true. And you don't have to have a accredited homeschool program from what I've looked at. I mean, here's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association website. They have different options for becoming a homeschooler. And the number one option they list is file an annual private school affidavit with the California Superintendent of Public Instruction. Nothing about the school districts.
Yeah. All right. Good point.
So,
all right. So let's move on to a little more coronavirus. This on the national level. The Center for Disease Control issued some new school guidelines for COVID-19 and basically they kind of, I think, lessened some of the stricter guidelines from their earlier set of guidelines. This from cable news networks, CNN update, everybody, from Friday of last week. And basically, they broke it up into several different areas. There's, it says keep open schools safe. So it has good hand hygiene is stressed. Learning stations and activities should have fewer students per group. Students should be placed 6 feet apart if possible. I'm not sure. Now, it says the old guidelines encourage the use of face coverings, but said they may be challenging for your students. While the updated guidelines mention the challenge for some students, particularly younger students with asthma, it emphasizes that cloth face covering and masks are one of many important migration strategies. So it sounds, I guess the language is a little less strident in the new ones. They have a keeping it clean section here. Schools are encouraged to increase the frequency of routine cleaning and disinfection, et cetera. That doesn't sound that new. Cafeterias, talk about lunch. Cafeterias should avoid offering self-serve food or drinks. Meals should be individually plated or pre-packaged. Schools should provide touchless payment methods if possible. Student travel. Schools should limit non-essential travel. It really is there a lot of just frivolous travel happening at schools? Anyway, I don't know. Schools should limit non-essential travel and consider postponing or canceling student international travel programs. Okay, et cetera. When someone does get sick, it says here, the CDC continues to encourage schools to work closely with local and public health leaders, blah, blah. I'm not going to keep going on too much of this stuff.
Yeah, so it's not, I mean.
You guys get the idea. They have a section on mental health, by the way, mental health services, which is important. And by the way, Bill de Blasio was also talking about mental health services in schools either today or yesterday. So anyway, so the point is, it's for those. There are some who say, the federal government has done nothing on COVID at all with respect to education, and they keep coming out with these guidelines. I think maybe a lot of people don't even really read them or don't even really care. They don't really use them. I think I don't know. I'm kind of speculating, but to some extent, I think some of this paperwork is generated by the CDC, and in an actual individual state does their own, and individual districts do their own on top of their state plans. And the CDC guidelines are like, well, okay, 6 feet apart, something like that.
Did you see Cuomo come out pretty harsh on Twitter? I don't remember the exact quote, but he pretty much said this is, the CDC revised their guidelines. This is all political. And, a lot of people were responding saying that, you're saying it's only political when they make decisions that you don't agree with. And if it is political, then why do you trust this power to be in the hands of these bureaucratic institutions?
The typical answer is, if we control it and if I'm running it,
it's science.
Government power is great. If other people are running it, then it's government power is political. I think you make a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's not just a tweet. He was on I think it was a press conference. I heard a soundbite on the radio actually of him talking about it. For those who remember what radios are, I was driving in my car, and and Andrew Cuomo said the part you're talking about on a soundbite.
Did you see that Dane County, Wisconsin is they ordered their private schools to shut down, or at least all schools, public and private?
Dane County, riots?
No, it was an order from a health county official, Dane County, Wisconsin, which includes Madison. I should have sent you this earlier, but
I did not see that.
I mean, this is similar to what we saw happening in Montgomery County, Maryland, right, where the health commissioner came down and said private schools can't reopen, but daycares are allowed to reopen. Same kind of thing. Are you sure
that's because all of this news flow about the riots in Wisconsin is, it's
this came out a couple of days ago before a lot of the other riots were happening in Wisconsin. Schools, private schools, public schools, not allowed to reopen unless you're in grades K through 2. It's okay to do in person. So some people on Twitter were kind of like, oh, maybe the private schools can renumber their grades from, third grade can be 1.3, and fourth grade can be 1.4.
I love that stuff. I love that style of thinking. Yeah. Well, what defines third grade? Yeah, exactly. I've just defined myself to be in 14th grade or something. Yeah, whatever.
Well, and we saw this in Sacramento, right, last week when we were talking about it, where the private school, to get around their regulation, retrained all their teachers as daycare providers, and they rebranded as a daycare to get around the regulation. So they could similarly do something in Dane County since the daycares are okay, I guess.
Yeah, no, that story was like the surreal of the surreal. It was like meta twice or something. Like, we're going to pretend if you call yourself, if you are a different institution, if you're a school, we're going to pretend that's dangerous and we're going to pretend daycares are safe. So then, like, the first meta is the school says, all right, we'll call ourselves a daycare. And then they're like, no, but you're cheating our fake distinction. Whatever. We did it last week.
Yeah, the official was like, yeah, you're just playing tricks or whatever the quote was.
Yeah.
I mean, well, then don't have the stupid regulation that makes it okay for daycares and then not okay if you all of a sudden start doing the teaching part where people can actually learn things, because for some reason that makes it more dangerous. It doesn't make any sense. And because it doesn't make sense, the private schools try to get around the dang regulations because they know that the regulations don't make any sense.
Yeah.
So let's get to the next topic.
All right. So
we're getting going pretty quick through these though.
No, we're doing great. So the 1776, that's next. So this is, you guys have heard about the 1619 project on the random assignment program.
Yeah.
What's this, Corey?
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't heard much about this, but it seems like they're doing a new 1776 kind of project, and you can fill me in on this, Bob, but it looks like it's a counter to the 1619 project to kind of teach more, from what I would guess, teach more that, America started at the Declaration.
So a group called the Woodson Center is being described by Real Clear Education, anyway, as launching this major initiative to give local leaders, this new curriculum. It's going to have essays by scholars. It mentions a few of them here. It says the 1776 offers perspectives that celebrate the progress America has made, Corey, on delivering its promise of equality and opportunity, and highlight the resilience of the American people. Okay, so this is saying, here's a quote. Quote, though slavery and discrimination undeniably are a tragic part of our nation's history, we have made strides along its long and tortuous journey to realize its promise and abide by the founding principles of America. This is a curriculum that acknowledges the sins of the American origin story, but nevertheless doesn't allow those to dominate the American story. This is something I see this and I think, and again, both of us are school choicers. Pick whatever curriculum you want. If you're running a private school, if you can attract, some Marxist parents, I guess you can have your elementary school for Marxism. But my point, I see this stuff and I love it because the indoctrination is enormous in public schools. In fact, I'm going to send you something once we're done with our rundown. Something that someone just sent me about a school that's going on, which is stunning indoctrination. So anyway, so that's there. The 1776 project to counter 1619. Now, let me get to my favorite commentary of the week.
Okay.
I know. I feel like, what? Thank God we finally learned your favorite. Go ahead.
Two favorite commentaries, don't you?
I know. Well, yeah, you're right. Exactly.
Is this one
getting ahead of it? You're getting ahead of me. So how perfect of an example of situational principles is this commentary by this woman named Madeline Black? I first read the headline. I wasn't even sure what she was saying. I had to figure it out. But she says her point here is that, well, let me just read a little. She says, every child in Detroit deserves to be treated equitably. Every child deserves a great education and access to the same opportunities. And yes, that's not how it all works. But then she goes on to say that for these districts and these establishmentarians, to use my word, that constantly scream over and over, equity, equity, equity. That's our big drive. We are all about it. We need equity. My God, why can't we have more equity? She says as soon as you bring up charter funding, it's just cricket sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So she's like, oh, you're like, you love equity so much in public schools, don't you? Like, that's your biggest thing. Man, it's so important. We're all about that. In fact, I've just lost my equity. I had a cricket sound effect.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. Anyway, the whole point is she's like, what happens as soon as people bring up charter schools?
Boom.
That's what happens. The people who love equity and education as an issue, what about charter funding? And suddenly you're camping. And suddenly, this is what you're hearing out by the lake when you're camping. Equity advocates go cricket sounds.
Bonkers. I mean,
what do you say to this, Corey?
Well, this reminds me of a Donald Trump Jr. Fox op-ed that he just wrote. I don't know if you've seen this one yet, but I think it was yesterday or today. Yesterday, Trump Jr. cited this. He cited that charter schools receive a lot less money than the traditional public schools, around $5,835 less per student. And guess who wrote the report that he cited?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I know.
My report with Patrick Wolf.
The great Patrick Wolf and the great Corey DeAngelis. Look at that. Wow.
And I mean, yeah, but it's, we've found this pretty consistently that the charter schools get a lot less money. In our most recent report, it was about 27% less than the traditional public schools.
Yeah,
and it reminds me of
depends on the state, of course. It varies around the country, but yeah, it tends to be 70 cents to 80 cents on the dollar. And but what about the bigger issue? The people who, are they intentionally lying when they say they are all about equity, and then suddenly when it comes to these other kinds of schools, then they stop caring about equity? Is it some sort of compartmentalized delusion on their part? Like, how do you analyze it?
Well, I don't know what's going on in their brains, but I think a lot of people want to protect a government monopoly system and force everybody into that monopoly. And so, I mean, that's part of it. That's part of it. But yeah, I mean, you could also define equity as, we want everybody to equally not have choice and not have opportunities, which, you and I know this, that in the traditional public school system, even if you equalize funding, you're not going to have equal outcomes in schools, and you're not going to have equal quality in schools just by forcing people not to have options. I mean,
for example,
in the public school system. So
one need look no further than the state of New Jersey, where they actually the systems that do the worst spend the most. They actually reallocated and rebalanced a lot of the funding in New Jersey, where the lower income areas spend much more per student than the higher income areas. It's an exception around the country in that regard. But there is, if you anyone who thinks that performance is directly related to spending per student, will see that isn't the case. So I think two things can be true at once. Choice and competition can increase quality. And then at the same time, if you have choice and competition, additional funding also increases quality. So it's not one or the other. It's not like you have to, if you advocate for charter equity funding, you're therefore acknowledging money is everything. You're not. Money is, I think a competitive marketplace for education is more important. And then funding is also important, and you can believe in both.
And well, I think Madeline Black has a great point here that it should be your child's educational funding should be equal regardless of the type of school that works for them. So, I mean, essentially what this finding is that when a child's school doesn't work for them in the traditional public school system and they opt into a public charter school, they lose about a quarter of their children's educational resources. And, a lot of the times it's disadvantaged families who are opting into the charter school sector. And, I'm even okay with having some type of weights for, like less advantaged, students getting a little bit more. I'm okay with that. All I want is the sector funding to be the same. Let's keep the funding the same in the system. But if a charter school works better for you and your traditional public school you're assigned to doesn't work, you shouldn't lose a quarter of your funding just because of that switch and that choice.
Right. We should say too, special needs students typically receive more money through federal Title I and stuff like that. And then, but also just one last point on what she wrote about her home state of Michigan. She wrote that last fall, charter school students and charter school students alone were singled out for a $240 per pupil cut by the governor. $240. So that's last fall, pre-coronavirus.
I mean,
$240 per pupil cut by the governor for charter students only. So as you point out, I'm sure they were already far less per student at charter schools.
Yeah, Ben DeGrow and I did a report on this in Michigan. I don't remember what but it was similar to what we found in the other reports, that like 15 to 25% range, less money. But yeah, this makes that inequity even worse, doesn't it? Yeah. And this is essentially what Tom Wolf in Pennsylvania was calling for, right? He was calling for fair funding, and his definition of fair funding was to defund the charter schools even more when the charter schools in Pennsylvania already get 27% less than what the traditional public schools get. And they serve more students of color, much higher proportions, and much higher proportions of low-income students than the traditional public schools in Pennsylvania. So his call for fair funding actually deepens inequities of funding by race and by socioeconomic status. So
okay, let's go to Florida.
I don't know if that happens in Michigan too, but
Florida, we had some bad news for teen school choice.
Yep. So we talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago, I don't know. But the teachers unions in Florida started a lawsuit against the governor because they didn't want to reopen the schools, and the governor did want them to reopen schools. Well, a Tallahassee-based judge just sided with the teachers unions, and they struck down the governor's reopening order. Maybe it came from the
judge sided with the unions, in other words.
The judge sided with the unions, and now what they're saying is that you can keep the order, but you got to make it up. It's got to be the individual choice of the individual districts, is what the judge says. Which I'm actually okay with that, even though I think the governor has a strong constitutional argument to make here that Florida Constitution says that there needs to be a free system of public schools, and they can't really say they're doing that if the schools aren't reopening. So I can see the constitutional argument to reopen the schools as well. But, the judge sided with the teachers unions and said, hey, we're going to let it be up to the districts. And I'm actually okay with that. And I've said that several times on this show, and I think you have as well, that local,
the more local, the better in terms of most decisions. I actually believe bring it to the school. Let school principals have a lot more authority in public education.
Yeah, let them pick, but at the same time, okay, well, yeah, if you're going to use that logic of local control, keep it going down to the family unit level. And if that reopening decision doesn't work for the family, let the families take their money elsewhere. And I think they quoted the union leader out there in Florida of saying something along the lines of, oh yeah, this is going to be good for all stakeholders. And they ended up listing like the employees in the system and
this
the
set of
union
adults
members.
and that set of adults and a third set of adults. It's good for everybody.
But not the families. They didn't mention the families, which
right.
I mean, that Governor DeSantis should come back and say, okay, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't force anybody to do anything. It should be local control. But okay, well then families need to be able to choose to take their money elsewhere, because if you're not reopening, you shouldn't get paid for a service you're not providing to families, or a service that's not working adequately for families.
I was about to say that. I was about to say that what they want is to be paid just the same as before and not open if they don't want to. So, and also have no regulations on how much online learning they provide, just however much the teacher feels like it, zero cut in any pay for anybody, zero cut in any staff for anybody, and just deliver like a fourth or a third of the service or whatever it is. Like that's what they want. That's what the union wants when they should. The thing, I'll tell you the thing that I mean, you pose an interest. I have to think about it. I'm not sure I agree with you on that, Corey, in terms of like whether or not the state should be able to tell the district, you've got to open for in-person and then let the families decide whether they want to come or not come. But you have to make the service available for in-person because you're an essential employee. Just like, who else? The nurses are essential employees and the person at the supermarket, they're essential employees. Why, teacher, are you declaring yourself suddenly not an essential employee when there are a lot of parents that do depend on you for their jobs? They have a place they send their kids while they go to work. Why does the teachers union have this latitude to declare themselves non-essential while, by the way, claiming 100% of the money? I'm not sure. I think it may be okay to force them to do it if I were, but
if the families aren't getting the money, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In other words, if the families are paying for this service and they are enrolled in the public school, the fact that you could just tell them we're just chosen not to give you the service, even though your taxes are paying anyway. I don't know. I may be uncomfortable with that. But let me just tell you the main thing. Go to the third paragraph of the story. This is, you alluded to it anyway, but just for me to drive it home a little more, the part about the judge's logic is the judge says the order to stay open school districts, the Governor DeSantis's order for Florida school districts to stay open, the judge says is unconstitutional. Why? One of the reasons he says it denies local school boards decision-making with respect to opening brick and mortar schools. What you alluded to was, there you are. Yeah, that's the language. Denies local school board decision-making with respect to opening. How often do these states order districts to do all kinds of things with zero concern about local school district autonomy and decision-making? It's constant. There's thousands of pages in every state about all kinds of stuff you order them to do where you couldn't care less about what the district says. Suddenly funding, right? Now, out of the blue, right? Yes, you have DeSantis ordering the schools to stay open, and a judge is suddenly
local control.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna stop local control? Yes, this will be a disaster. The sky is falling. Chicken Little, local control is being threatened. My goodness, pearl clutch.
Pardon? Don't all the schools have to do the state tests and stuff in Florida, and it's partially because 50% or like half of the funding is state level funding? Is that?
I think ESSA requires state tests everywhere as well. NCLB, no trial left behind into the ESSA law. I think there's state testing in all traditional public schools. And the point is just that anyway, it's just suddenly local control. It just made me jump out of my, like when I was reading this thing, I'm like, oh, some judge is suddenly now worried about local control? Really? Why doesn't that same judge strike down thousands of other pages of state law then?
Look,
using that same line.
I see it. And
there's
fighting with the unions here, and I think funding the people would solve all the problems.
Of course.
They would make different decisions about reopening if people could take their money elsewhere. That's why the grocery stores reopen. That's why daycares are reopening. That's why private schools are fighting to reopen. It's because they know that their customers can take their money elsewhere. The public schools are in large numbers saying, nope, not reopening. And it's because they get your money either way.
Now, I will say Florida does have Florida Virtual School, which is free for all Florida students, which is online learning for all. And they are one of the groups that have done it for years. Like my two piano players from last week, the one woman who was a world-class maestro, and then the little kid banging on the keys. Well, Florida Virtual is like the world-class maestro piano player. They've gotten really good at online learning, and every kid in Florida does have it. So that's a factor to consider. But anyway, it's not all about Florida. Let's move on. Let's go down. Well, actually, we'll head up the East Coast and go to Virginia, where I saw this story about government regulations artificially limiting. A friend reached out to us, Corey, about examples where private schools are forced to close because of local health officials, like in Montgomery County, Maryland. Before that then got reversed with Governor Hogan jumping in. Anyway, so we've been interested in looking at private schools forced to close because the health official doesn't, whatever their motives really are. But there's a second case where you don't necessarily force the private school to close, but you artificially reduce the enrollment of the private school. That's happening too. And I just wanted to show people what that looks like.
Private schools in Hampton Roads are seeing a huge uptick in calls as many parents look to keep their kids in the classroom this fall. Montessori schools, for example, known for their hands-on education. And right now, officials say their phones are ringing off the hook. 13 News Now reporter Allie Weatherton explains why they can't welcome any more students back this year.
At Chesapeake Montessori School,
we are going back face-to-face because we feel we can do it in a safe manner.
Teachers are putting their final touches on their classrooms. But this year, they are adding a few new tools to keep children safe, one of them being plastic shield dividers.
Physical things that we have in place are everything from a lot of sanitization processes to a lot of hand washing to mask wearing for children who are 3 years and older.
Head of school Shanna Honan says as many Hampton Roads public schools announced online learning amid the pandemic, parents started looking to private schools for face-to-face instruction.
Our phones are blowing up. People calling from every age, from infant all the way through 6th grade, saying, I need a place for my child to go. I'm a working parent. What are the options?
But despite the increased interest, Honan says the school doesn't have enough room to accommodate more students. She says government regulations only allow so many children in a classroom at once.
I actually had to disenroll 16 3-year-olds because I did not have any space. Very tough, but we have no choice. We follow government regulations.
Parents are still scrambling for options just days until the start of the 2020-2021 school year. Honan wishes she could be more of a help to them.
I very much feel for the situation. But like I said, there's only so much we can do.
While her hands are tied there, she says she'll do everything in her power to keep her students and staff healthy and safe at Chesapeake Montessori School. In Chesapeake, Allie Weatherton, 13 News Now.
So she says nothing we can do. We follow government regulations, and they had to disenroll. She looks like a nice lady, and it looks like a good school. Like I would think a lot of parents would want to send their kid. I can understand why they have a lot of demand at that school, but it's not the parents saying doing this. It's the government saying you've got to disenroll kids because we're going to require you to have fewer kids. I don't know. What do you say, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of all these other private school closures that we're seeing, but it's a different type, right? They're using regulations rather than outright closures, which it's harder to get, people amped up about, but it's the same result, right? You're preventing families from accessing schools that they otherwise would have been able to access. And I think we haven't reported on this, but I think I saw something about this in DC public schools. Yeah, it just happened a week or two ago, but we never brought it up on the show. But it was a similar type of regulation that, in their official documents on schools and what needs to be done with schools overall, is they limited the class sizes to 12 students or less, I believe. So it's not the same kind of thing, but yeah, it's another way to regulate the private schools here in DC. And it doesn't matter what type of, how big the room is. So for example, it could be a gymnasium. It still has to be 12 students according to the
That is
document.
just insane. That makes me crazy. That makes me crazy. It's absolutely insane. How do you define classroom then? What if they put up a curtain, in the classroom and called it 2 classrooms? Is that allowed now? Is that allowed? Like, well, that's not. I mean, anyway.
I mean, well, and how often are these things are in regulations. So I think the private schools are not going to want to go outside of those regulations just because of the risk. But I wonder how big that risk actually is of government officials figuring it out, especially if you're like a Montessori school and the regulation says 12 students and you have 13. Like, yeah, maybe
one of the standard playbooks of the establishment is not just when they can to ban school choice, for example, and we're changing the subject a little bit, but one of the standard practices is to regulate to death school choice. So regulation can be used as a soft form of banning because it tends to kind of lead to some of the same outcomes.
Well, that's what we see with the charter school thing we were just talking about, right? If you can't beat them, defund them and make them get a lot less than. And this is the whole fully fund students thing you have in the sign in your office, I believe, where the DC voucher kids get 1/3 of the money as the DC kids in the public schools. The voucher kids get about 10,000. The DC public schools get over 30,000 per student. So if you can't beat them, try to beat them by draining their funding as much as possible. And if you look at like the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force, or even the Democratic official policy plan is, they're calling to regulate the charter schools by allowing the public school districts, their competition, to approve their expansion.
That's how California got rid of their state appeal for charter authorizing. But anyway, all right. So we're already in an hour. We got it. Huh?
I mean, of course, McDonald's is going to say, "Oh yeah, Burger King sucks. You can't expand Burger King because we're better than you. Can't have our customers stop there." But yeah, let's look at this going on in Virginia as well.
This is the one I referred to earlier in the program when we were talking about indoctrination, and we were talking about the 1776 project versus the 1619 project about indoctrination. Look at this. This is a parent basically writing, saying, "This is happening in my school."
Alexandria City Public Schools in Virginia.
Yep. Speaking of Virginia, yes.
I mean, this is their middle school orientation for her 6th grade son. And so it wasn't a class. It was just, here's orientation. This is how school's going to work this year. And, she reported all this in the comments. But here's the screenshot from her Zoom classroom. And in the background, you have a lot of political stuff, behind the man speaking in the photo. It says something like Black Lives Matter, pro-civil liberties, climate change is real. No family separation, something about women. You can't really see it completely, but it seems to be a lot of political stuff behind him. And Julie even, pointed out in her thread that, I don't even necessarily disagree with any of these things, but for sure if there was like a Make America Great Again thing behind him, the school system would be furious about it. And she's just saying, she also says, though, she wouldn't want like a Make America Great Again thing behind him either. So it isn't what's behind him. It's just that there's politics making its way into the classroom that she doesn't like. So she made that clear all throughout the conversation as well. Yep. That it's not, the agreement or disagreement. It's just the concept of politics.
It's not the how to think. It's the what to think.
Yeah, so a lot of people saw this and they're like, "Oh, this is why they don't want families watching the virtual Zoom, is because families are going to see a bunch of stuff that they may not like, especially if it's political stuff making its way into the classroom, where they think the families might see it in a biased way." So.
Okay, so let's say you said there's a Gallup poll. There's a new Gallup poll out.
Yeah, man, we are almost up at an hour. But yes, there's a new national survey out from Gallup, came out yesterday, and I tweeted about this. But the main thing I thought was interesting about this is a nationally representative, legitimate Gallup survey. And they, asked people what their, the main takeaway that I saw was the switch to homeschooling and an exodus from the public schools that we hinted at earlier. So national, we've mostly been seeing little districts here and there reporting homeschool filing increases and people saying that they're enrolling kids from public schools. But this is a nationally representative survey that says that there's going to be a 7 percentage point drop in people enrolled in public schools this year, district-run public schools, from 83% last year to 76%, which if you multiply that out by the amount of kids in the public school system, that could be about 3.5 million fewer students in the public school system if that finding is actually correct. And the homeschool filing, the homeschool result that they found, they asked, how many people are going to unenroll their children and do full-time homeschooling. And they found a doubling of homeschooling from 5% in 2019 to 10% in 2020. 10% would be a doubling in homeschool population. But yes,
you could just say that that's the virus. It's no commentary on education at all. It's just my kid. I don't want them around any other kids because then they'll die of COVID. They'll be the third child on earth to die of COVID or something. So we have to, whatever. I'm being glib, but they'll bring the virus back, and the grandparents will catch it or something. But right? What about that? What about that? This says nothing about education.
Can't say that because they put in the survey question that when we're talking homeschool, we're not talking public school at home or remote learning. We mean literally not enrolled in a formal school. And maybe some respondents didn't understand that, but from the wording of the question, the public, if you're in remote learning in the public school, and it's because you're afraid of the virus, you would still be counted in the public school categories in this survey. So,
fair enough. Yeah.
Even after that, it looks like there's going to be a pretty big exodus out of the public school system. And they also asked just, satisfaction with their child's education. And that dropped from last year 10 percentage points, from 82% satisfied to 72% satisfied in 2020.
All right. But it's within the range. It was 71 the year before that, I guess. But at any rate.
Yeah, so there's a jump and then a decrease. Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, all right. So let's finally, in a dramatic crescendo for the program, Corey, let's get to, I think America was clamoring to get my second favorite commentary of the week.
Woo-hoo!
I'm going to applaud myself.
Whoa.
This is my second. Now, sometimes you'd say, my favorite commentary would have to be one I agreed with. Well, sometimes a favorite commentary can be one you disagree with. Like the old Time magazine would have the person of the year, and it could be like Hitler or something like that. It's not always that you agree just because they're favorite commentary.
They did that? They really did that?
I bet so. You want to Google it now? I think Hitler was a man of the year in Time magazine.
I'll look it up later. Later.
Fine. People can let us know. And so... it says this: I'm a professor who spent the last 10 years preparing new teachers to enter the workforce. I also study how race, culture, and power influence education and childhood development.
Hold up. You're right. Wow, that's crazy. Okay. I never knew about that until today. Thanks.
Anyway, so, hey, it was before I wasn't born either, by the way, in 1940, whatever. But anyway, so this is a professor who teaches teachers, who says that he also studies how race, culture, and power influence education and child development. Okay, that's fine. Okay. When more than half the roughly 50 million children who attend public school are non-white, unlike most of their teachers, he writes. Okay. He also writes this underrepresentation is especially acute for black male teachers. While 1 in 4 teachers are men, merely 2% are, while 1 in 4 teachers are men, merely 2% are black men. So, all right, 25%-ish are male, but only 2% are black male. He says research indicates that students of color benefit from being taught by people who look like them. I'm fine with all that. I think that's all 100% true. But then he hits me up with this quote. He says, quote, racial colorblindness can actually function as a form of racism. And that's the part where he loses me. That's the part where, as I've said on this, there you are. Racial colorblindness can function as a form of racism. In my opinion, I mean, I just couldn't disagree with that more. I think we should not judge people by the color of their skin. We should judge them as individuals. We should be racially colorblind. The way to get rid of racism is to stop judging people and dealing with them differently because of their skin color. And therefore, the fact this professor is teaching teachers that they need to deal with them differently because their skin color should mean you treat one kid one way and another kid another way is a big problem with me. Call me a dinosaur. Call me a sort of a, kind of a, I'm not with the times or whatever you want to say. I believe in individuals. I don't believe in skin color as something that should change how we treat people. And in that regard, I disagree with this man.
Yeah, I hear you. This actually reminds me of a study I did with Marty Lukin in Indiana, looking at just the racial characteristics of teachers in charter versus traditional schools, and the charter schools actually had higher proportions of Black teachers. So if that's his argument that we should have more Black teachers in the teaching force,
and Black male teachers. I think that's great. That would be great.
I think I agree with that, and I think one way to do that and to perhaps facilitate more of this matching that this race matching kind of literature that he's citing, and to get the benefits of that could be to allow for more charter schools.
That's a good point.
At least that's what we found in Indiana. I don't know what the national data look like. It would be interesting to look it up.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I'm fine with outreach to find if you ran a school and you thought, it might help some of these kids to have more Black male teachers. Let me do outreach to try to do that. That kind of, that's not the race consciousness that bugs me. The kind of race consciousness that bugs me is when you're dealing with an individual and they have an individual problem and you change how you deal with them because of their skin. That to me is the definition of racism. Dealing with someone on an individual basis differently because of what they look like. So anyway, I know that's kind of a rant to end the day on, isn't it? Usually we anyway, but maybe we can talk about something else. Anything in your life that the people should know about, Corey? You have you been
there's been a push recently. Well, it started today. People nominating me for Forbes 30 under 30. If you want to go fill that out. But yes, everybody. I'm under 30 years of age, even though I look maybe.
I'm lobbying for Forbes 6,000 under 60.
Yeah, there we go.
So there's that. So people can actually vote for you, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, you had to fill out a form, but it's not too long. It's not hard to do.
Yeah, can you show people how to do it? That's a good thing to end our show on. Everyone should vote for Corey.
It wasn't my idea. It wasn't my idea. Someone messaged me last night on this, and they said, "Hey, look, there's this thing. I'm going to nominate it for you." And so I told them, okay, that sounds great to me, and shared a screenshot of them nominating me. But yeah, if you go to Forbes.com/30
or I bet if you just Googled Forbes 30 under 30. Yeah.
And there's a lot of different, sectors. I guess education probably makes the most sense. But not enough of that.
Are you listed there? If you click,
no, I'm not listed. You have to go through the form to nominate.
Oh, this is the nomination process.
Everybody. This is my last year for this.
Right.
I'm 29. I turned 30 in a few months.
You will be over the hill soon.
Yeah.
And so this is the part where they're nominating you to then get on the short list. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know if there's even a voting procedure, but there is a nomination procedure. And I think that is kind of like a voting procedure based on how many nominations you get. But
all right. Well, I can't believe it's August 26th. Can you believe that is the summer almost over? I mean, I guess we haven't had Labor Day yet, so we got that to think about. But I'm a little depressed about the summer being over.
Spring break is almost over.
Anyway, so thank you for watching this edition, the almost summer over random assignment episode with Corey DeAngelis and Bob Bowden. We appreciate it. By the way, if you want to visit choicemedia.tv, you can see all the news we post every day on our website, also on Twitter and Facebook. And so And so that's it for me. Corey, why don't you do the official sign off?
Yep, that's all I have to talk about as well. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for another week of Random Assignment. We'll talk to you again next week at the same time on Wednesday, talking about the latest and greatest news in the education policy debate. Thanks, everybody.